Money, talking about money, and talking about death. And those are two things that are difficult for us to talk about, right? Um, and yet, it is so important for us to do that. The fact is that there are all kinds of charitable organizations that are reaching out to our church members asking for those end of life gifts. And for the most part, it seems that the church is silent on that issue. And so I remember long ago talking with John Wesley, who at the time was senior minister of First Christian Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I asked him how they had been able to be so successful in encouraging those end of life gifts and building up their endowment fund at the church to support their mission and ministry. And he said to me, "It's Western Kentucky University." I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Western Kentucky is so good at teaching planned giving, at encouraging those end of life gifts." And he says, "We're in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and so many of our members are alumni or faculty or staff or have children who go there, whatever." And so when the church finally started encouraging people to include the church in their end of life plans, the response that John told me was that most people said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe we remembered the university and not our church." You see, the church wasn't asking. One thing, so we have come up with a plan at the Christian Church Foundation to help you in your congregation encourage those end of life gifts. And it revolves around you establishing a legacy society in the church made up of people who have promised an end of life gift and have given permission for their name to be listed. Just those two things. No proof, no dollar amount, nothing. It's just as if people were making their annual pledge to the church. It's the Legacy Society, which typically would be called something like First Christian Church Legacy Builders or Central Christian Church Legacy Partners or Legacy Circle, something like that. Um, it makes such a difference to have leaders in your church leading by example, by willing to put their plans in place and allowing their name to be listed. So we found from the very beginning how well this works in congregations, but we didn't really know why. But there was a study that was done a number of years ago now that helps explain why it's so successful in our churches. In that study, they found that if an individual or a couple goes to an estate planning professional and no mention is made of a charitable gift, 5% of people will, on their own, choose to include a charitable gift in their end of life plans. If that professional simply asks the question, "Would you like to include a charitable gift in your end of life plans?" then it jumps from 5% to 10.4% just by asking the question. That's an important lesson for us, right? The church needs to be asking. But then if the professional adds a statement saying, "Many of our clients choose to include a charitable gift in their end of life planning. Is there something you're passionate about that you would like to include?" It jumps from 10.4% to 15.4%. And if you think about it, it's because some people out there somewhere are choosing to include a charitable gift to some organization we know nothing about. And so how much more powerful is it in the life of the church, where it's not some unknown organization, it's the church you love and which you have been a part of. And it's not some unknown individuals who are offering those gifts. It's people you worship with and work with and love with. Um, and so it is not unusual at all for even small churches to develop a list of 10, 15, 20 current church members who promise an end of life gift to the church. Um, we have one church that I'm aware of that that currently has 101 people in the congregation who have promised an end of life gift to the church. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the long-term impact that's going to have when the gifts of those current members are put together with the gifts from those who have come and gone before us? together with those whose gifts will come after us. And you can begin to imagine what a positive impact that's going to have on the life of the church. Colleges and universities and all kinds of other charitable organizations have known this for a long time, but for some reason, the church seems to be late coming to the table. So what I want to help you to understand through this webinar today is how you can encourage those end-of-life gifts for your church in ways that will allow you to do more ministry than you think you are able to do. Again, I know that you all are out there listening. If you have questions or concerns about any of this, please feel free to ask the question, and I will respond to them. So how do you go about doing this? The first thing is that you all need to have a permanent fund policy in the life of your church. If people leave end-of-life gifts to the church, what happens with that money? If people leave a gift to the American Cancer Society or to a hospice of whatever county or to the American Heart Association, they know pretty much how their gifts are going to be used and the impact of those gifts. If they leave a gift to the church, what's going to happen with that money? Oftentimes, people don't have confidence, and sometimes they even fear that maybe it'll cause a fight in the life of the church. Do we use the money now, or do we put it into a permanent fund and use the income off of it? Should it be used for outreach, or should it be used for the care and maintenance of the building? Those kinds of tensions arise in the church if you don't have a good permanent fund policy. And so I want to encourage you, if you don't have a policy, to go to our website at the Christian Church Foundation. It's www.christianchurchfoundation.org. And then click on the congregational button and then click on the policy so that you can see a model policy that's being used literally by hundreds of disciples' congregations around the country. And that policy, everything in that policy has a reason. And so I encourage you to use it for the basis of establishing your congregational policy. It will describe what a permanent fund is. It will describe the difference between unrestricted gifts and restricted gifts. And it will delineate between restricted for endowment and restricted for purpose. And when you look at it, it will make sense to you. It talks about the responsibilities of the permanent fund trustees, who will be the ones who will monitor this ministry in the life of the church and encourage this ministry in the life of the church. It also, one of the responsibilities of those permanent fund trustees are to include the church in their own plans. And I have to tell you, if this is going to work in your church, it's going to be because you have people who are committed to this and people who have skin in the game, right? And then it also spells out what will happen with the annual distributions from your permanent fund. And the most successful policies typically have two big chunks for the annual distribution. One is outreach, making a difference, doing the ministry that God calls us to do, right? The second big chunk will go toward the care and maintenance of the building, typically, because it's out of that building that we often do so much of our ministry. And then in addition to that, might have a smaller percentage for possibly birthing new ministries in the life of the church. So often we have new good ideas, but we don't know how to fund them. This can help be an incubator for those new ministries. A small portion typically is at the discretion of the board because of special needs that come up one year or another. Oftentimes, congregations will also include 5 or 10% to support regional ministries. That's a decision that you all will need to make, but the policy shows you where that fits into the policy and how you go about making those decisions. And then there are two other things that are included in the policy. Number one is an amending procedure, right? You put the best policy you can in place, but things change over time and you need to be able to amend it. You want the amendment process to be possible, but you want it to be difficult. And the reason for that is because that policy is really a promise to members of your congregation so that they know how their gifts are going to be received, how they're going to be stewarded, the difference they are going to make by the distribution. And so ideally, you don't want the policy to be able to be amended until everybody in the congregation knows that that conversation is going on and that the board will be considering a possible change. And then finally, the policy needs to have a termination clause in it. If your church ever ceases to exist or to be a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, then what? What happens with those funds? One of the ministries of the Christian Church Foundation is working with congregations who have come to the end of their life cycle as an active church. What gives them real hope and peace in the midst of the grief of that process is knowing that although the doors to the church are going to close, the ministry can continue. And oftentimes in more significant ways than they had been able to do in the last years of their life as a congregation. And so the policy will typically say, if the church ever ceases to exist or to be a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, then the fund will be donated to the Christian Church Foundation with instructions on the annual distribution. We at the foundation do not want to make that decision. If it comes to that point in the life of your congregation, it's our job then going forward to stand in the shoes of the donors, in this case, the congregation, and carry out their plan in perpetuity, supporting ministries that have been important to that church, to your church in its lifetime. So again, we're not the ones making the decision, but that termination clause needs to be in the policy, again, so that people have confidence that they know that their gift is forever going to be making a difference. I'm just checking to see if there are any questions. I don't see any yet. Okay. So policy is a key building block that you need to have in place, again, so that the congregational members will have confidence that they know how their gift is going to be used. So how do you begin this ministry?
Randy, we have a question from Sandy.
Okay.
Does the termination clause, is it up to the congregation as to which nonprofit the money would go to? Would it be bound to go to the Christian Church Foundation, or could it go to some other charitable organization?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy, for your question. The answer is that it's up to your congregation. After being in this ministry at the Christian Church Foundation for 23 years, I can't imagine that there's another organization that would be better poised to carry out your plan at that point. But it is the congregation's choice. And the reason we say that we're good at that is because we know church, we understand church, and this is our core competency in ministry. So, for example, if your congregation donates the money to the Christian Church Foundation, if the life cycle of the church comes to an end, and you name 3 organizations, let's say Week of Compassion, the Christian Church in Kentucky, and a local food pantry. If at some point in the future that food pantry ceases to exist, then what? Who's going to make the decision long after the church is gone as to where that stream of income will go? Well, it would be our job at the Christian Church Foundation at that point to, if you did not give us a plan B in your permanent fund gift agreement, it would be our job to stand in the shoes of the donor, again, in this case, the congregation, and say what ministry most closely resembles that which the church wanted in the first place. So again, it's your choice, but I think the Christian Church Foundation is uniquely gifted to be able to do that. Not for any benefit of the Christian Church Foundation, but for us to carry out the plan of the congregation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Randy, we've got a question in the question and answer box.
Okay.
Asking if you can talk a bit about the benefit of having a separate group of trustees to steward the permanent fund rather than folding it into the responsibilities of an existing finance committee.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Corey, for the question. In some small congregations, they find it difficult to have a separate group to do that because there are so many leadership positions that need to be filled, and there are only so many people to fill it. And so in a case like that, they might have their current trustees also serve as the permanent fund trustees. Our best recommendation to you, though, is that you do have separate permanent fund trustees whose sole responsibility is to carry out what the permanent fund policy of the congregation says. We find that if it is a group that has many responsibilities, this is a ministry that is easy to put on the back burner. And so it doesn't receive the attention that it needs in order to encourage those end of life gifts going forward. It's a unique skill set, I think, that is needed. But more than that, it's a unique commitment that needs to be made for those who are the permanent fund trustees who will carry out this ministry. People often ask me, well, who should the permanent fund trustees be? Do we need a lawyer? Do we need an investment manager? In some cases, those people who have, those skills can be helpful to you. But the most important guideline to use in deciding who are going to be the permanent fund trustees are who are the people who are most highly respected in the life of the church? Who are the people who are most trusted? Who are the people who are passionate about this ministry and want to be leaders? Those are the questions I would ask in determining who those trustees are going to be. I hope that's helpful, but if you want to push back, feel free to do that. I see your response. Thanks, Gordon. So how do you then begin this? You decide as a church that you're going to establish a legacy society, and you name it. Again, First Christian Church Legacy Partner, let's say. And you begin broadcasting as widely as possible that you have established that you are establishing this new legacy society. You tell them what the name of it is, and you tell them what I suggested to you earlier, that it's made up simply of people who have promised an end-of-life gift to the church and people who have given permission for their name to be listed. And then you say out loud in worship, in the elders meeting, in the board meeting, anytime you can, you say, if you have already included the church in your end-of-life plans, please let us know so that we can put your name on the list. This is a momentum building ministry, but it has to start somewhere. And typically when you do that, when you begin asking the question, you will develop a list of, sometimes a small list, sometimes more than what you might have anticipated, of people who have already included the church in their end-of-life plans. And then there are a couple ways you can go. One is that you could have a gathering with those people just to say thank you and to tell them what your plan is in promoting this going forward. Sometimes that creates a great deal of energy. And then you begin planning either one or a weekend of small group gatherings. And in these gatherings, what happens is, and you tell people why. You say, we're establishing the First Christian Church Legacy Partner program and would like you to come and learn more about it. And then you get these people together. And what happens in that meeting is that, somebody offers, and these are more powerful if it's held in people's homes or at a local winery or someplace special like that. You can do it at the church, but it seems to be more effective if it's somewhere else. You welcome people, you thank them for being there, and then you have one or two people who will witness as to why the church is so important in their lives that they have chosen to include the church in their end-of-life plans. You do not want them to tell about the attorney they used. You don't want them to tell about the gift instrument that they used putting their plan in place. What you want is to capture the passion of those individuals who have already included the church in their end of life plans. Let me give you an example of this. Covenant Christian Church in Cary, North Carolina. They had their very first gathering, and it was on the back deck of the home of a couple in the church. It so happened that this couple also was very, very good at preparing barbecue, and so people knew that. That was one of the hooks that got people there. But they were, again, upfront about why they were having this gathering. They ended up having probably 35 people that had gathered together, had dinner on the back deck of the house. People were enjoying being together, as we do when we gather with our church family. Karen, the chair of the legacy trustees at the time, stood up and she thanked people for coming. And then she said, and I just need to tell you that this church has been so important to my husband, Bob, and I, that at the end of our lives, the church will actually be receiving 2 gifts, because this church invited us into leadership roles in ways that we never thought we were gifted to lead. This church has given us a renewed passion for making a difference in this community in which we live. We believe in this church and we want the ministries to continue for generations to come. And so Bob and I have put a plan in place so that the church will receive those gifts. Karen, at that point, she was retirement age. She was in her retirement. Then another member of the church, who was probably in his mid-40s, stood up. And he said, you know, this church is so important to our family. He said, you all know our younger son, who has caused so much disruption in the life of this church because of his special needs. Never once have we heard anybody complain about him. And in fact, you see how he has changed over time. And we credit this church with a lot of that because you have loved him through that. You've also taught our boys the importance of accepting all people and making a difference in this world. We want very much for the ministry of this church to continue. And so we have a plan in place so that at the end of our lives, the church will receive a gift. And then the pastor, Chris Furr, stood up and he said, you know, ever since we started talking about this, Katie and I, my wife Katie and I have been so excited about this. But honestly, at this point in our lives with 2 young boys, we don't have any wealth. And in fact, what we have is a lot of student debt, and we don't know how to gift that. And of course, people responded appropriately. And then Chris said, but just last week, a mentor of mine, a layperson from First Christian Church in Wilmington, North Carolina, died. And we found out that he left a gift of life insurance to the church. It's going to make a significant impact on that congregation. He said, Katie and I have recently been meeting with an attorney to make a will. And he said, and through that process, we were convicted of how important life insurance is for us in case something happened to either one or both of us, that our boys would be cared for. And he said, we have that policy. And so we decided that we could just take a small percentage of that policy and name the church as a partial beneficiary. And it feels so good that we can join with you all in becoming legacy partners of this congregation. I have to tell you, I don't know if I communicated that well enough or not, but the hair was standing up on the back of the necks of the people on that deck that evening in Cary, North Carolina. And then after that, they invited me to talk about some simple ways in which people can include the church in their end-of-life plans. And then Karen passed out a brochure that they had prepared in advance and simply said, we would like for you all to consider joining with us in becoming legacy partners and making a difference in the long-term ministry of this congregation. Contained in that brochure was a tear-off sheet where people could respond saying, yes, I or we have included the church in our end-of-life plans and would like to be legacy partners. The second choice was we have included the church but wish to remain anonymous. And the third was we would like more information about how to become legacy partners. And I'm telling you, there were 30-some people leaving that house that night thinking, we really need to do this. And so you see what happens in that situation is it's nobody's arm is being twisted. There's no guilt whatsoever. Nobody is having to have an uncomfortable conversation with an individual saying, would you include the church in your end of life plans? It's done in a group, non-threatening situation. And I'm telling you, after having experienced this so many times, I have to tell you that not only is it not negative, but it is extremely positive. It's energizing in the life of the church. Um, if you go to our website, there is we call this process the mentoring model. And if you go to our website, again, christianchurchfoundation.org, and you click on mentoring model, there is a video, a 3-minute video that's there. There are two pastors who are on the video with me. One of them is Susan Diamond, minister in Kentucky, and the other is Chris Furr, the one I was just describing to you at Covenant Christian Church. And one of the points that Chris makes in that video is that even though they have a younger congregation, and although they have not yet been receiving gifts from people who have died and the gift came to the church, it has already had an extremely positive impact upon the church. And he's asked why, and he says, where else are you having these gatherings where people are talking about how powerful the ministry of this church has been in their lifetimes? And he says it just has an energizing effect and has had a positive impact on their annual giving of members as well. And we hear that story over and over and over again. So I hope you can see how non-threatening this can be in the life of the church through gatherings such as that. As you think of questions that you want to ask or concerns that you have about that, let me also tell you that on our website, the same mentoring model page where the video is, there's also a brochure that's there that gives you all kinds of other hints about how to, about other things that you can do in the life of the church that will also work toward encouraging those gifts.
Randy, we do have one question. If you look in the Q&A,
Okay.
how do congregations typically or most successfully publish the list of legacy givers?
That is a great question. And my answer is that we are disciples and we do it so many different ways. So some congregations have a plaque that they put up in a highly visible place. If you happen to go to Beargrass Christian Church in Louisville, you'll see they have an amazing large rendering of this that you cannot miss. There are other congregations that will have a little frame that they can change easily with a list of legacy builders that they post in a classroom, in a hallway, or whatever that is. Every year, we encourage congregations on All Saints' Day to not only remember the saints who have died in that last year, but also lift up gifts that have been received. And in that process, also list the legacy partners of the congregation with some kind of a statement saying, if you would like more information, please contact, so on. If you would like to join those of us who have included an end of life gift, contact so and so. Sometimes congregations also, like the congregation I'm a part of, Tapestry Church, and just outside of Indianapolis, we always do the All Saints Day thing. And so we'll list the members there. And we in our church now have over 45 people who have promised an end of life gift. Usually in September or March of the year, we in worship just briefly do a PowerPoint presentation helping congregation know impact, how the distribution from the previous year was used and what it accomplished with pictures and all of that. And then typically on that Sunday, we also show the legacy partners, legacy builders in our case. And so there are just a number of times in which you can do that throughout the year. And you do it in a humble way. And the other thing I need to say is, you give people the opportunity to be anonymous, right? When somebody, in my experience, when somebody wishes to be anonymous, I try to talk them out of that. And I say something like, thank you. Thank you for the gift plan that you've put in place. Thank you for the humble way in which you want to offer your gift. But I want to encourage you to change your mind and allow us to list your name for a very unselfish reason. And that's because I know if people see your name on the list, it's going to encourage them to want to put their name on the list. And I had never been denied when I had done that until, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And it was at our church. And we had a legacy weekend. And we had gatherings that weekend. And in worship, we focused upon it. And afterwards, there was a woman named Jane, I don't know if she was 5 feet tall or not. She came out and she looked up to me and she goes, Randy, we have included the church in our end of life plans. And I said, oh, thank you, Jane. Can we put your name on the list? And she said, no. And I went through my spiel that I just told you. And she looked at me, she smiled, and she goes, I get that. But she goes, that's not us. And so we really wish to remain anonymous. And so I said, okay, Jane, I said, your name will be on the list as anonymous. And anytime that list is published and you see anonymous there, that's you, okay? And it was just a fun conversation. But it leads to another point. If you have more than one person or couple that want to be anonymous, list anonymous more than once. If you have 5, list it 5 times. Again, this is a momentum building ministry. And so the more names people see on the list, the more encouragement that offers others to put their name on the list. Hope that makes sense. So I'm looking to see if there are any other questions, and I'm not seeing any right now. So when you have that, again, the brochure is important because the brochure is going to talk about the ways in which people can give, and it's going to talk about the impact that their gift is going to have in the life of the church.
Randy,
Sandy, what's your question?
We have a permanent fund and have had it for a number of years. Recently, the local bank, the trust department of the bank, holds the investments. The local bank has raised its fees.
Mm-hmm.
Does the foundation take in like a global fund, fees from money from congregations, and invest with monies from other congregations? And if it does that, if it provides that function, you have an idea about what those fees would be?
Yes.
The change in the fees has dramatically impacted what our annual income is.
Yeah. Yeah. Sandy, thank you so much for asking that question. Yes, one of the ministries of the foundation, of the Christian Church Foundation, is offering long-term investment opportunities. We have 5 different funds from which you can choose, all highly diversified and all long-term in nature. And the fees are extremely low. When I first started at the foundation, it was 95 basis points annually, which is just less than 1%, 0.95%. Then we lowered it to 75 basis points, and now it's 50 basis points. So 0.5% annually, prorated over the time that you're invested with us. Church Extension, Disciples Church Extension Fund, offers short-term investing, but when we're talking about permanent funds, it's long-term. And so you want that invested in a way, not only that it's providing a stream of income to you annually, but also that it's growing to keep pace with inflation. Because if your fund is not keeping pace with inflation, it's really not a permanent fund because you're decreasing the value of your fund.
Could you give me a contact person? I don't want to bore the group with specific. Who would we contact
Yeah,
to-
that would be me, Sandy. So feel free to do that. And Don, I'm hoping after this, you can send out maybe a group email to the participants. We can do a link to the Christian Church Foundation website, and also my contact information so people can follow up with me and I can help them move forward in this.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. And I just need to tell you, with those investment funds that we offer, this is something that none of us individually could ever do as much as us doing this together. We have organizations within the Christian Church of Disciples of Christ who invest with us, who have more than $50 million invested with us. We have congregations who have less than $1,000 invested with us. So everywhere in between. But even those large investors at the Christian Church Foundation could not get the sophisticated investment at the low cost that we offer by themselves. And so again, it's truly something we can do better together than any of us can do on our own. So thank you, Sandy, for asking the question. Not seeing any others. Let me continue talking about the process, about questions that I typically hear people ask. So when you have a gathering like the one that I described, how many people do you need to have there? Or how many people are too many? I've not been in a situation where we've had too many. I think the largest one I probably had was years ago at Central Christian Church in Lexington, where it was a fellowship dinner after worship. And I think there were probably 150 people there. I think it's better to have the intimate, smaller gatherings, but that still worked. I've also been in gatherings where there was only 3 or 4 people there. That can work, but it is much more energizing if the group has at least 8 to 10 people who are there. And I also need to tell you that it is a lot of work to get people to those gatherings. That's the hardest part in this entire process, especially when you're first starting this in the life of your church, because people aren't sure about this and they wonder how much it's going to hurt. And it's not going to hurt, but that's their impression. And so something that I have experienced time after time after time is congregations plan one of these gatherings or a legacy weekend when they offer maybe a Friday evening opportunity, a Saturday brunch opportunity, Sunday school opportunity on Sunday, something like that. So people have choices of where they can go. But time after time, what happens is they advertise this, they send out invitations, and a week or two before the event, I get a frantic call from church leaders saying, we're not having people sign up. And I say, that's not unusual. Now it's time for you to get on the phone, you and others, your permanent fund trustees or whoever's leading the charge on this. Get on the phone and make personal invitations to people. That's what's going to get them there. And then time after time, that weekend comes and there's a significant amount of people who are there. I tell you that just to say that it's work to get them there, but it is worth it. Once you get them there, the positive response rate is extremely high. If people are in those small group gatherings, they hear what's going on, they catch the excitement and the passion, they are likely to want to be a legacy partner, legacy builder, legacy circle member of your congregation. The other thing that we've learned through the years, a couple of things. One is that as you begin this process in your church, long ago, I learned how well people respond to people leading by example. It took me a while longer to realize that in almost every church I've worked with, there are people who want to be that example. There are people who want to lead by example. And those are the people who will help you make this a positive experience and a successful one in the life of your church. For this to work, it takes a pastor who is very, very supportive, and it takes at least one lay leader who is willing to be the person out in front leading the charge. I have had congregations I see the question, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Thank you. I have had congregations. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. I'll answer the question and maybe it'll come back to me. How often should these gatherings be held? Annually? As you start this off, you want to get saturation, and so you want to give everybody the very best opportunity to participate. So I think it's in the first year that you do this, it might be important even to do more than one legacy weekend or more than one legacy gathering, because you want to give people the opportunity. As you begin this, I would then the second year, I would do it again, make it a big priority to have another gathering and invite people who weren't able to make it the previous time. Then after you do that, there are other things that you can continue to do that don't require quite as much work. Newsletter articles quarterly about what it is, what your legacy partner program is, and how to be involved in that. 2 times a year, or even up to 4 times a year in worship, have somebody do that witness about how the churches had been so important in their lives that they've chosen to include the church in their end of life plans. Newsletter articles that you can offer. All Saints Day annually is a great opportunity. But then after you do those first couple of gatherings, it's okay to take a couple of years off. That is a lesson that we learned as well. But then to make sure that you pick it up again. And so in the off year, let's say, when you're not doing anything, schedule a thank you event for those who are already on the list. One of the things that is very true in the world of fundraising, in the world of planned giving, is that just because people are on your list who have made a promise, that doesn't mean they're always going to be on the list. They can change their minds. And so you want to continue to nurture those who have already said yes. And so some of the most fun things that we've done is had a thank you event at a local winery, if that fits within the culture of your congregation. It can also be in someone's home. It can be at the church or other venues, where you simply invite those who have already made a commitment for no other reason than to say thank you. And while they're there, what we have found really kind of has an impact as well is if you have that thank you event at the very beginning of the year, and you know the impact that your fund has had the previous year, if in fact you have a fund that's up and running, it gives you an opportunity to report to this group the impact of this ministry in the life of the church, and to simply say to them, thank you for the gift that you will eventually offer to the church. And can you imagine the long-term impact it's going to have when our gifts are added to those that the church already has, to grow that stream of income, to increase the ministry that our congregation is able to do. Those events, it's easier to have those thank you events. They don't require as much time or energy, but the impact of those is really significant. Let me see, is there another question there? Advice on how to handle a statement from someone who is not sure how they want to direct the use of their legacy gift. Outreach, building fund, future capital projects, etc. Great question. Great question. So the policy I talked with you about early on spells out how the annual distributions from your fund are going to be distributed if the gifts received are not restricted for purpose, right? And so what we find is when we have a policy in place like this, when a congregation puts a policy in place like this, and members of the congregation know how their gifts are going to be used, with part of it going to outreach and part of it going to the care and maintenance of the building and part of it at the board's discretion and birthing new ministries, whatever those maybe 4 areas of distribution are, the number of restricted gifts ends up dropping and the number of unrestricted gifts ends up rising because people know how their gifts are going to be used. Just wanted you to be aware of that. But secondly, restricted gifts can also be very healthy in the life of the church. And so you don't want to turn those down. So it may be that someone is including the church in an end-of-life gift, but they have a lifelong passion for the music ministry of the congregation, or a lifelong passion for the youth ministry of the congregation, or the outreach ministry. Those will be great gifts. And they're received just like the other gifts. They're invested in a permanent fund just like the other gifts, but the annual distribution from those gifts will be exactly what the donor suggested. And so again, both gifts can be good. Having said that, one thing I did not mention in your policy is the policy also needs to have, and the model policy does, a right of refusal. Some gifts are too expensive for the church to receive. Some gifts are inappropriate for the church to receive. And so you have to be able to say no, if in fact that's the case. I'm seeing another question. You had started by saying that it requires a minister and lay leaders' leadership in order to start this. I'm hoping you can tell us the next step. Yeah, I encourage you to go to our website, to that brochure, the legacy, the mentoring model brochure that gives you all kinds of steps that you can take. The first step that we have found to be most helpful in the life of the church is what I described to you earlier about casting a wide net, and encourage people, if they have already included the church in their end-of-life plans, to let you know. Then I would work with the legacy fund trustees. Again, your policy will have been approved by the board and the congregation, and then you need to recruit the legacy fund trustees, and they will be the ones then who carry this forward. Getting a brochure ready. And again, we have all kinds of resources available to help you with that. We can give you examples of a brochure for you. Planning the first gathering that you're going to have. Making sure that when All Saints Day comes around, you're lifting up this ministry in the life of the church. And again, the other things that are a part of the that brochure that you can find on our website. We see another question that I often hear. It relates to people saying, you know, we might at some point in the future move. And what if we move and we become members of another congregation? Or a pastor saying, you know what, I hope to serve this congregation for a long time, but sometime in the future, you know, I might retire and move somewhere else, or I might be called to another congregation. What then? It's important to make sure people in your congregation know that they can make changes. They can make changes in this. And so the example of pastors, for example, I know some pastors who have in their end of life plans that whatever my membership is at the time of my death, that church will receive the gift. I know other pastors who have divided their gift among the 3 congregations they served during their ministry. And so you can assure people that they can change their mind in the future. So last year, Tapestry Church, where I'm a member, we had one of those thank you events. And that particular one was at a local winery. And that's pretty easy for us because a member of our church owns that winery, so we get a good deal. But when we were sending out invitations and making those contacts, calling people, we realized that there were 4 giving units. I think there were 1 individual and 3 couples who were no longer actively a part of the church. And so what do you do? So what we chose to do was we contacted each of them, not by email, not by mail, but by a phone conversation saying, look, we're planning a thank you event for the legacy builders and would like to send an invitation to you. We know you're not actively involved in the church right now, so we don't want to leave you out. Just want to make sure you know that you're invited. In 3 of the 4 cases, they chose not to come to the event, but all 3 of those said, please keep our names on the list. And the 4th one, who's no longer involved in the church, actually came to the event, and that provided a re-entry point for her to get back into the life of the church. It was really cool. Another question. What if the congregation includes an attorney who would draft a member's will at no charge? If the member includes the church, pushy or a good way to advance a cause? It's a dangerous way to advance a cause. It can work, but wills can be challenged. And it could be a family member who would challenge the will because they would say there was undue influence placed upon the individual by an attorney who was a member of the church. You can do it, you can make it work. But one thing that we suggest is that if you're going to suggest the name of an attorney who might help people, instead of listing the name of an attorney, list the name of more than one attorney if you can, and say, don't ever say that the church recommends that, but say there have been members of the church who have had a positive experience with this attorney, these attorneys, something like that. That can work without there being that undue influence. That's a great question. Thank you for that. I know our time is coming to an end here. Are there any other final questions that you have? And while you're thinking, let me say, I would be honored to work with you moving forward on this. I can help you with the policy, suggest that you use you draft a policy based on our model policy, send it to me before you seek approval in the congregation so that I can give you feedback. You are the local experts. I have expertise in this particular ministry, and when you put both together, it will cause you to have a much better policy.
Randy, we do have a question from Jackie Summers.
Okay.
We're going to take that. We've got about 5 minutes left, and there'll be a webinar evaluation that'll poll to the participants.
Okay. What is Jackie's question?
She should be able to unmute herself and speak.
Hey, Jackie. You're still muted. There you go.
Sorry. Now, Zoom had a lot of steps to follow to unmute. So my question is, because I know this question is going to come up, is when we start this legacy givers group, do we say to people, I mean, I'm going to have somebody come up to me and say, well, my dad left so much money to the church. Will you put his name on there? And he has already passed.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So what we do is we encourage, when that comes up in a congregation, we encourage them to do their research and try to come up with the best list they can of people who have already given gifts, and create a plaque or a list honoring those people who have. Congregations are often afraid that they're going to leave somebody off, of course. And so what you do in that situation, you develop the best list you can, and then you publish that and say, if you are aware of a family member who has also given a gift to the church in the past through their, an end of life gift, please let us know so we can include their name as well.
Great.
With the legacy
Thank
builders, sure, thank you for the question. With the legacy builders or the legacy partners, the list that you're developing, what happens then when one of them dies and the church receives the gift? Churches handle that in different ways. Some will simply put a star or an asterisk next to their name with the date of their death and a note at the bottom, thanking those whose gifts have been received. Others keep two lists so that when the gift is received, they take it off the legacy builder list and they put it on the, whatever you want to call the other list that's there. So you want to do everything you can to honor those who have made an intent to give a gift and those who have in fact given a gift. And before our time runs out, I also want to say the touch points where I can be helpful to you are with the policy up front, and then any questions that you have about that at all. Working with your leadership team, the Legacy Fund trustees, once they're recruited, to come up with an action plan for how to create, how to promote this ministry in the life of the church. And then typically when you have those legacy gatherings, invite me, and hopefully I can come and be a part of that to do that piece within about the simple ways and sometimes even more difficult ways that people can choose to include your church in their end of life plans. And if you have those funds to invest, as we talked about earlier, I'm happy to help you with that as well. The partnership that we have with you in local congregations, we think is a powerful one. And I want to be of help to you in whatever ways I can. I see one more question. Does the church need a gift acceptance policy? What do you mean by too large a gift? I don't know if there is too large a gift that people can give. I think sometimes it intimidates people because they fear that maybe it will have undue impact. But if you have that policy in place, that is not going to be a negative issue at all. I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question? I lost that. I'm sorry.
Does the church need a gift acceptance policy?
Oh, gift acceptance policy. Yes, we have one that we can offer to you. I think the permanent fund policy actually covers that because it does give you the right of refusal. It gives the permanent fund trustees the ability. I did say before, sometimes a gift can be too expensive for the church to receive. And what I meant by that is if a property is donated and that property has environmental issues, or that property has tax liability, or that property is unsellable. Oftentimes people will want to donate a cemetery plot. Those aren't very marketable at all. And so things like that can be a problem for the church. Or if the gift to be received is something that does not fit in with the ethical standards of the congregation, that happens sometimes too. So that's what I meant about a gift being too expensive for a church to receive. And our time's almost up. Dr. Gillette, thank you so much for providing this opportunity. And for those of you who have been participating, please let us know at the Christian Church Foundation how we can continue to support you in your ministry and hopefully help you create those streams of income to support your mission and ministry.
I want to thank you, Randy, for the wealth of information that you provided for us today. I believe it was very helpful to most of those that were able to attend. Our next steps is we're going to email and send out the website and Randy's particular information, because he is our zone's vice president and I think Randy doesn't even mind driving to some spots in Kentucky.
That's right.
So I want to just thank you all for participating, and just thank Randy once again for his wealth of information as we look to continue moving forward. So I want to just say thank you all, and God bless you all. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye.